Good morning, everyone. Grade 12 webinar for English Home Language is just about to start. I see there are still a few people registering, so we'll wait another 2 minutes for them. Hello, everyone. I'm still here. I see there are still a few people registering. I'll wait another minute before we start. Good morning, everyone. It seems as if the numbers are standing still now and we can commence with the session. Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar. I'm Wendy Pepler, Chief Education Specialist for Languages. Before we begin this webinar, let's cover some of the basics. If you are struggling to hear me, make sure your audio is on and your speaker volume is turned up. You will automatically be muted when joining the session. Should you have any questions, you can ask your questions in the question box below or on your right, or raise your hand. To raise your hand, click the icon on your dashboard below or on your right. After this presentation, you can download it, you can download this presentation in the handout box below or on your right. You will also find all this information in the question box below or on your right. Remember to send us your questions. Attendees are encouraged to ask questions and leave comments. However, irrelevant or inappropriate comments will result in the attendee being dismissed from this session. If we did not get to your question, please send an email to academics@impact.co.za. Questions in the question box will be answered and made available afterwards. If you did not receive the questions and answers, please send an email to info@impact.co.za. Visit the Impact YouTube channel for recordings of the session. Before starting with the poem that we're going to discuss today, we're going to have a brief look at how the June examinations will look. Paper 1. Section A will be a comprehension test for 30 marks. Section B will be a summary. You, as English Home Language candidates, have to answer this summary question in paragraph form. Section C, Language in Context, 30 marks. 20 of these marks will be allocated to visual literacy, for example, adverts, comic strips, cover pages of books, posters, etc. Paper 2, Section A, Poetry. Questions 1 to 4 will be prescribed poems. You will have to answer 2 of those 4 questions for 20 marks. Question 5 is an unseen poem that is compulsory for 10 marks. Section B is your novel. Question 6 will be your literary essay on the novel. Question 7 will be contextual questions on the novel. Section C, your drama. Question 8 will be the literary essay on the drama. And question 9 will be the contextual questions on the drama. What you must note is that you have to answer one literary essay and one contextual question. If you answer the literary essay in section B, you have to answer the contextual questions in section C. If you answer the contextual questions in section B, you have to answer the literary essay in section C. Paper 3. Section A is your essay for 50 marks. Section B is your transactional text. There you have to write 2 texts, each counting 25 marks. You need to study the following for paper 2, which is your literature paper. Poems. You will see there are 12 poems to study. Edward, Edward, The Going, The Good Morrow, And Death Shall Have No Dominion, Toads, I Have My Father's Voice, Sonnet 146, Naming of Parts, The Child Dying, The Loss of India, Visiting Room, and Remembrance. And then you must study your notes on answering an unseen poem. You note there are 12 poems you have to study, of which 4 of them will be in the exam paper. We cannot say in advance which 4. Your novel, The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry, you need to study the entire novel. The drama, Long Day's Journey into Night, you need to study the entire play. For sample questions, previous exam papers can be found on my.impak. Study notes can also be sourced from the internet. This is in addition to the study notes in your study guides. Now, we will start with Sonnet 146, Poor Soul, the Center of My Sinful Earth, by William Shakespeare. Before we study the poem, let's revise the features of a sonnet. All sonnets have 14 lines. All sonnets have a rhyme scheme. There are 4 main types of sonnets. The first one, Shakespearean or English sonnet. The Shakespearean sonnet consists of 3 quatrains and a rhyming couplet. Just to remind you, a quatrain consists of 4 lines and a couplet of 2 lines. So 3 times 4 is 12 plus the 2 is 14. The rhyme scheme of a Shakespearean sonnet is AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. That is the rhyming scheme of your 3 quatrains and then your couplet. The Petrarchan or Italian sonnet consists of an octave and a sestet. Remember, an octave is 8 lines and a sestet consists of 6 lines, 8 and 6 being 14. The rhyme scheme of the octave is ABBA, ABBA, and of the sestet is CD, CD, CD. The Miltonic sonnet is one whole piece without a break between line 8 and 9. The rhyme scheme, the same as the Petrarchan sonnet, ABBA, ABBA, CD, CD, CD. Then you get the irregular sonnets that can consist of characteristics of a mixture of these sonnets. I'm now going to start reading Sonnet 146, Poor soul, the center of my sinful earth. Poor soul, the center of my sinful earth, starved by these rebel powers that thee array, why dost thou pine within and suffer dearth, painting thy outward walls so costly gay? There you will see the first quatrain, the rhyme scheme AB, AB. Why so large cost, having so short a lease, dost thou upon thy fading mansion spend? Shall worms, inheritors of this excess, eat up thy charge? Is this thy body's end? The second quatrain, rhyme scheme CD, CD. Then, soul, live thy upon thy servant's loss, and let that pine to aggravate thy store, by terms divine in selling hours of dross, within be fed, without be rich no more. Rhyme scheme of the third quatrain, EF, EF. So shall thou feed on death that feeds on men, and death once dead, there's no more dying then. Your last rhyming couplet, GG. The structure of the poem, as we said, was 3 quatrains and a rhyming couplet. It has 14 lines. The rhyme scheme AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG, typical of the Shakespearean sonnet. It has 3 quatrains and a couplet, typical of Shakespearean sonnet. However, the turning point, which we call the volta, is at the beginning of line 9. This is a feature of the Petrarchan sonnet. It therefore consists of an octave and a sestet, but at the same time keeps the rhyming couplet to round it off. Let's look at the first quatrain, the first 4 lines. Poor soul, the center of my sinful earth. My sinful earth is a metaphor. He's comparing his soul to a sinful earth. Starved by these rebel powers that thee array. Again, it's a metaphor. His soul is being compared to rebel powers that are starved. Why dost thou pine within and suffer dearth, painting thy outward walls so costly gay? Again, a metaphor. And if we look at outward walls, it could be referring to a building and saying here, painting the outward wall so costly gay. In other words, painting the outside gay. But if we look at his soul that he's referring to, he might be referring to his body, that outwardly he is adorning his body. The poet is speaking to himself. We call it an internal monologue, using the figure of speech known as apostrophe. An apostrophe speaking inwardly. He is addressing his soul, asking his soul why it is suffering, because his body is getting all the attention. Comparing the outer body, arrayed in expensive clothes, etc., while the soul is starved. Painting thy outward walls is a metaphor comparing the body to a house. It is expensive to maintain his worldly outer man, so ghastly gay. What is Shakespeare really saying in this first quatrain? He is paying too much attention to the body, the worldly things. He is neglecting his soul, his spiritual life. He is really having a conversation with himself. We call it confessional poetry, about his obsession with material things. Let's look at the second quatrain, lines 5 to 8. Why so large cost, having so short a leave? Why so much money, when life is short? Dost thou upon thy fading mansion spend? Again we see a metaphor with his body being compared to a mansion, to a house, to a huge building. Shall worms, inheritors of this excess, eat up thy charge? Is this thy body's end? Here the house metaphor has been expanded. We could even in this poem speak about an extended metaphor, a metaphor carrying through from the first stanza right through, the metaphor with the house. Ask why he spends so much in temporary things. In the fading mansion, it's fading in temporary things. Fading mansion, life is short and things of the world are temporary. Shall worms, inheritors of this excess, eat up thy charge? Is this thy body's end? The body came from the earth and will return to the earth with the help of the worms. What is Shakespeare really saying in the second quatrain? The poet points out the stupidity of spending so much time and money on worldly things. His body, mansion, is aging, it's fading. Life is short in comparison to eternity. It's silly to beautify the body which is going to die and decay. The worms will inherit it. The poet ends the octave with a rhetorical question. Is this thy body's end? It's not right for the soul to fade away while the mortal body consumes the entire budget, all for nothing. And if you remember when we were speaking about the structure of the poem, this is where the turn is going to take place in the third quatrain. The third quatrain, lines 9 to 12, the first 4 lines of the sestet. Then, soul, live thou upon thy servant's loss. He's again now comparing the soul living on his servant's loss, a metaphor. And let that pine to aggravate thy store, by terms divine in selling hours of dross, within be fed, without be rich no more. This is where the turning point takes place. The soul is exhorted to invest within, not without. The first 2 quatrains, they spoke about the outer body. Now he's looking inward at his body. To trade the false, costly facades of the world for the inner divine values that will not fade with time. Let the outside wither, pine, so that the inner soul can prosper. What is Shakespeare really saying here? Then, meaning that if the soul agrees, then it must buck up and do something about it. It must live at the expense of the body's welfare. If the body is starved, made to pine, it will increase the store of resources for the soul to allow it to flourish. Although the poet is still addressing the soul, the good advice applies to himself. If he eliminates the time spent on worthless things, dross, material goods, and worldly desires, his soul will be happier. He will be buying time in heaven by terms divine. In other words, if he spends less time on the worldly things and these worthless things, the dross, the materials, and the worldly desires, he will be buying time in heaven for his soul. He repeats the advice in practical terms. The soul inside him must be fed by paying less attention to the outer man, worldly goods. He repeats this advice in practical terms. The soul inside him must be fed by paying less attention to the outer man, the worldly goods. Then finally, the rhyming couplet, lines 13 and 14, also the last part of the sestet. So shall thy feed on death that feeds on man, and death once dead, there's no more dying then. This is personification. It is stating that death can die. The couplet finishes the metaphor from the first quatrain of the starving person within the mansion. As I said, you could speak about an extended metaphor in this sonnet. Typical of Shakespearean irony, death that feeds on men, death itself being dead, so too the words death, dead, and dying, when the final image points to eternal life. What is Shakespeare saying in these last two lines? If the soul takes Shakespeare's advice, it will feed on death. Death is feared by worldly, non-spiritual men and feeds on them. If they are secure in their spiritual life and assured of eternal life, death can no longer feed on them and will turn pine and fade and die. This is a complicated idea. Death, personified in the use of capital letter, will die. Death will die, and there will be no more death. It's a contradiction which we call a paradox. Contradicting itself in this way, death will die, and there will be no more death. Meaning, when you die, there will be no more death, there will be eternal life. The final statement is that there's no more dying then. The Christian and other faiths is that living in a spiritually aware way and believing will ensure eternal life after death. The soul thus does not die, but lives eternally in the afterlife. Now that we have completed this, have you any questions? You can put your questions in the question box and I'll attend to as many as I can. What is a volta? A volta in any poem is a turning point. In this case, Shakespeare, in his first 8 lines, is speaking about the outer body and blaming the outer body for neglecting the inner soul. And then the volta takes place, the turning point, from lines 9. Then he starts speaking and advising the inner soul, and I can say shunning the materialistic side. How are you able to identify a sentence if it's a metaphor? It is a comparison. So as soon as you see that something is being compared to something else without saying like or as, but you can see the image that it is a comparison to something else, then it is a metaphor. If you are asked to discuss the effectiveness of a metaphor or other imagery of a poem, what is actually being asked and how should one approach the answer to such a question? You would have to look at what is this metaphor doing. If the metaphor is comparing, let's say, in this extended metaphor in this poem, the body is being compared to a building. We saw the outer walls of it. We saw them speak about the mansion. Then you will, if you say, how effective is this? Then you can say it is effective because you can see that more attention is being paid to the outer body than to the inner soul. Each poem, of course, will differ there. Is it irony that there is a starving man in the mansion? Yes, you could consider it irony. Ironically, the soul is being neglected on behalf of the mansion, the body. What is the theme of the sonnet? The theme of the sonnet is the neglect of the soul on behalf of the body, and then the progression of the soul in the last sestet. What is a contradiction? Anything that is compared and the opposite to something. If we say the opposite to something, then we are contradicting. When you answer a question of contradiction, you have to show both sides of the contradiction. What is the tone of the sonnet? You can see it in many ways. It could be a very reflectory tone, reflecting on life. It could be somber. If we speak about the wasting on material stuff instead of paying attention to the soul. Should we pay more attention to the poems that you are going through for the potential exams? No. You will need to study all 12. I am going through these poems as they have been prescribed for term 2. Last week we did the first one for term 2. This is the second one for term 2. There are still another 4, 5, no more. 6, 7 to do this term. Okay, here it says, ma'am, I have a question from the poems activity that has me stumped. 3.2. Give one word, a technical term for the turning point between the octave and the sestet. That is the word volta. Volta. That is the turning point. Here's a question not pertaining to this poem. For the novel Harold Fry, are there any suggested films to watch and whether there are specific websites? I do not know about a film for Harold Fry. Even if there was one, you must read the novel because no film is exactly word for word the same as in the book, and sometimes even situations and settings and characters may be changed. What is the business of the sestet in this poem? In this poem, the turning point took place, the volta took place, and he is actually now addressing the soul to become priority above the material goods, the body. Could Shakespeare be referring to the fear of death being eliminated when saying death will die, and that's why I cannot feed on the spiritual people anymore, because they do not fear it? Yes, he is eliminating the fear of it, because he's saying death will die. In other words, no more is no more fear for it. Death will die, but it will live on. In other words, your eternal life will live on after death. What is a sestet? 6 lines. Couldn't outer body refer to his soul leaving the body, or is it only referring to his body image? No, it's referring to his body image. In other words, all the attention he's been paying on his outer body, material things, etc., and neglecting his soul. How does it compare to octave and sestet in the quatrain? I think you are speaking here about the difference between the Shakespearean sonnet and the Petrarchan sonnet, being that the Shakespearean sonnet has 3 definite quatrains and a rhyming couplet at the end. And the Petrarchan sonnet has an octave and a sestet. But because the rhyming scheme of this poem is that of Shakespearean sonnet and not of the Petrarchan, but the turning point in this case takes place after the octave, after 2 quatrains. Therefore, we speak of the octave and the sestet. Can we still submit questions via email for other poems done as well? You are welcome. I will attend to them. Please explain an extended metaphor again. An extended metaphor, this is a very good example in this poem, because the metaphor the comparison refers the body to a building in the first stanza, and it carries on throughout the poem. Therefore, it is an extended metaphor. It's the same metaphor that is used in different words, comparing to the building in this case. Okay, I think I've gone through most of the questions. Questions that I have not attended to will be summarized, and you will be able to receive them from academics@impact.co.za. If you do not receive it, as we said in the beginning, please send an email. If you are not registered with Impact, contact us at info@impact.co.za. Thank you for attending this webinar. I will be seeing you soon again. Thank you and goodbye.